Welcome back to the channel, everyone. This is part 2 of our talking about Hastur and Cthulhu. Welcome back to the channel, and you are
Dracula Von Craven.
good to have you back, man.
Thanks, man. Always a pleasure.
Yeah. So let's kind of dive into Hastur a little bit. So I kind of get the vibe that Hastur, while he's similar to Cthulhu, I feel like there's some big differences, and I don't know if that make sense.
It does, and in fact, if you, I don't know how familiar you are with the mythos, but they are half brothers.
Yes.
And they hate each other.
Like a lot. Like
yeah.
So it makes sense that they would feel different, like because like when you get used to an entity or when you're in contact with them a lot, you kind of get certain kind of feelings or sensations that are different from like other paths.
Yeah.
And I feel like even though like Cthulhu and Hastur deal with a lot of madness, I feel like I almost feel like Hastur's a little bit more subtle and he's a little bit harder to figure out. Does that make sense?
They have like a different flavor.
Yeah. Do you feel like Cthulhu's like really like in your face, like very upfront with stuff, and maybe Hastur's a little bit more like disguised or guised?
Yeah. In fact, they say that the King in Yellow is like the most mysterious of all the gods.
Mm-hmm. And it's like it says in The King in Yellow, and Robert Chambers, as he wrote the King in Yellow, and like man, so like H.P. Lovecraft took a lot from Robert Chambers.
He did.
Like a lot. And but when you read The King in Yellow, it's almost like it's tuning your brain into what this is. And as magicians, we know that books do this. We talked about the Necronomicon doing that. And but it's so weird it's hard to explain to other people, like why is this thing both scary but also like just sublime to people like us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's scary because it takes us out of realms that we're familiar with. Because even in magic, it's easier to identify with Ares, the god of war, than some octopus creature from beyond the stars and the void.
Yeah.
Especially if they don't have your moral compass.
Yeah.
Because they say Cthulhu cares not for your plight. He don't give a damn.
But you have to be tough in order to work with them.
Exactly. In diving into these mysteries, quote unquote, like each madness of each great old one is a little different.
Like Nyarlathotep, there's also that one.
Yes.
And have you done any workings with that being or entity?
No, but he's chimed in a couple times.
During channeling
Huh?
During channeling, or what were you doing?
I think he was just messing with me. Because the Black Pharaoh, like if there was a devil in the Cthulhu mythos, would be him, because
that vibe.
Yeah, he's the most mischievous of all the elder gods, and the most in contact with humans, oddly enough. And a lot of times, he'll mess with, and get everybody all riled up and stuff. And then the madness of Azathoth is, I mean, it just, well, each of these mythos creatures have unspeakable, horrors attached to them, and a madness undefined, and something like Azathoth that created all those would be even more so. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And it's so weird. So this might be a little bit out there, but well, I guess all this is out there. So I have this idea of not necessarily that I feel like there's a source and everything's a part of the same thing because it's very very tied into shamanism.
Yes.
And I feel like the subconscious, both now and before anything had formed, is what we're tapping into, and that's why it takes madness in order to tap into it. Is because we're coming from the defined to the predefined or the still yet to be undefined, and we're trying to bridge those gaps. And I will say that my does that make sense first of all?
No, it does.
And with Hastur, so Hastur is very mysterious, but I feel like he is a broken god. I feel like there's something that happened at some point that just completely shattered him as a god. And I feel like when I tap into him, it literally feels like I'm tapping into like a cracked window or something, and my consciousness is like trying to figure out what the cracks represent and all this. And every time that when I've seen Hastur, there hasn't been that many visions. The first vision I ever had really messed me up for 3 days. I was really confused for 3 days, and that was after reading The King in Yellow, and then somehow for 3 days it was like this weird breaking, and then I feel like my mind went there, and then over time a little bit of the memories start coming back more and more and more, almost like my brain couldn't take it. And then over time, my brain started to be able to process these memories a little bit by little bit. That's why, I have all these paintings of what Carcosa looks like. But I feel like Hastur's always looking away. Like he doesn't really look at me per se. He's always looking away at the breaking. My endeavor has been trying to figure out what that breaking was, and if it's tied to my own breaking. Does that make sense?
I think, well, first of all, yes, it does. Like you kind of, if you look at the mythos as a whole, you see it. You see it. And I noticed that there's a gap or an area where you notice the difference, and it's coming from I always muck up the pronunciation of this name, Haisha the shepherd.
I think you're close enough. Yeah, I think you're close enough.
Like because that's the first of anything where Hastur is mentioned, and he was worshipped by Hasha, and I remember because Hastur is a god of shepherds, and he's the repairer of reputations. And
I didn't know that second part. I'm glad you told me that. That's interesting.
yeah, and the only reason I even came into this is because when I got it, where I started getting into Hastur, or where he's really gotten my attention, like I had to study the whole thing. I had to know it,
Mm.
and
You get that frenzy where you're like, I want to soak up more of
yeah,
this. I like learn.
and yeah, it's like this like a frenzy, but it's also like an obsession. And you gotta find the end of the rabbit hole,
Mhm.
and well, entities like this you never do, but
It's like
you
sometimes it feels like a loop. Other times it feels like you encounter something new. It's interesting.
yeah, and yeah, I was gonna say something but I forgot.
Yeah, no, it's okay. You're on the. He's both the god of shepherds and repairer of reputations.
Yeah, and which I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting because like I feel like perhaps his reputation, perhaps among the old ones, or perhaps his flock. It's almost like he feels very lonely in the sense that it feels like his flock is gone and something happened. With Hastur, I keep on coming back to this, like something like happened with him, and I feel like he's almost like encouraging people to work with him in order to help him process stuff, and then at the same time he's helping us process our stuff. It's almost like we have like we're jerry rigging all these PS3s to have like some kind of supercomputer or something and process information. And what one of the things that really makes me think that is when I had this crazy vision that I just keep on having little segments of like coming to my mind, and that's why I have this is what Carcosa looks like. I don't really know why, but this is what it looks like. And, it does line up with how it's described by Chambers. But there's certain differences where I'm like, where did this come from? Am I making this up? And then I don't feel like I'm making it up because it feels true to the
soul.
It feels right. Does that make sense? It just feels right. Like this is what it is. And we all go through that thing as magicians where it's like, you know what? We get to a point where it's like, hey, you can fucking believe me or not. Like, I don't care anymore.
Yeah. you just become aware of things, not of the mundane world.
Yes.
The more you kind of keep on going, like you notice that some people are just not there, whether they don't want to be or whether they can or whatever that may be, you know what I mean? Especially like the magical peoples, we seek out things that not other people would do, just regularly.
So I hate to return back to what we were talking about before about Satanism, but don't the old ones feel very different than like a Satan vibe? Isn't like the vibe just completely?
Oh yeah.
Like it's just completely different because and I like what you said about the moral compasses being different because it feels like we're so used to understanding the world a certain way, and then we're introduced to these energies, and perhaps they might even talk to us through channeling or something like that. And it's like I don't even know what to do with this. This is just odd. Like it's really odd, and I hate to. So I don't like to go into either extreme where I think the old ones are evil. I don't think that they're good, but it's almost like they all have a certain function in madness. Does that make sense? Like they all have a certain thing that they do or things that they do. And honestly, I think Hastur is one of the most mysterious. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, of course. And I mean everything about Hastur is mysterious. Even the mask has no emotion.
Yeah.
And we're messing with this titanic forces in the cosmos or in the void or wherever these things come from or may be. And and as this and those places are a lot different than heaven or hell or Valhalla or
Yeah.
It's like I'm not saying that those places are like more or less of what's the word I want to use for this? Like I don't even have a word for it. Like better or anything like that. But is this that they're just completely different?
Yeah, and the foreign is scary. Well, and when we're talking about the old ones and Hastur as well, like physics don't work the same way in other dimensions, and neither does space. And I feel like their individual consciousnesses or conscious, I don't know if the plural is consciousness, but their different consciousnesses reflect where they are, and also just like they're formed by their environment and what they went through and their environment in the multiverse, all these different dimensions that they're in. It's almost like wherever there's an old one, they're in their little pocket dimension converges onto them, and then so all the rules that apply in that dimension apply to that consciousness that you're tapping into. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And like the only one that is like really a true master to all these universes would be Azathoth, because he's like he created everything, but yeah, like when dealing with these entities, especially compared to like Satan or Lucifer or like there's, I mean, even though those are like divine beings or infernal beings, like there's still something reminiscently human,
Yeah.
and these entities, the great old ones, are nothing of the sort.
Yeah, because when you think of, so I know there's this whole thing, it's not demons, it's daemons, but regardless of that, like it's almost like demons or daemons and angels, you can figure out what their opposite is because their relationship is so fixed.
Yeah.
and it feels like it's fixed, because I know a lot of like daemons, they used to be old gods, things like that. That's something that's brought up in the left hand path community like a lot. And but I feel like over time people's relationship to that entity has changed that entity into something. Like it's almost like our relationship to something makes our relationship to it prominent for the future or the progress with that entity. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, because I think what happens is that in a way you feed the egregore, but in ways it evolves. So you don't get this menacing devil anymore. You get this kind of anti-hero kind of character. You know.
And definitely love to see more of that for sure. That's yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah. Like I forget what I was reading, but it was talking about the devil as a character, and they talked a little bit about the origins of where this thing was the big bad, don't come near it kind of thing, and we come to in the evolution of it to where like oh this guy is not that bad, he's just got a raw deal, or he's really the hero of the story that something kind of mess up happened to, and now he's in this stupid situation where he's the bad guy, you know and I think this over time, just that shift of energy will actually change the entity in question.
For sure. Because I mean, like if you only feed an entity a certain way, because gods, spirits, demons, what have you, they they do feed upon perhaps worship, perhaps, and the way that you worship them, the offerings that you give, it's almost like changing their diet and them being formed by the diets of what you're offering up.
Yeah.
Uh, and with there's also this element where it's like with time we relate to these beings in different ways as things progress. And if we're more advanced as a person, they might ask for something else. Like for instance, for a lot of the Viking period, the offerings that Odin received were far more simple or even brutal. But then later on, once human civilization has developed more, it's almost like we're ready for that next phase of offering, or next phase of this being that we're working with. And I wonder how that will play into working with Hastur or Cthulhu or any of these beings.
You know what? Like a lot of it is kind of like the Wild West right now, especially in the Cthulhu groups. Like, because a lot of these things are being formed as we speak. And the kind of trouble that comes with the current is that there's not a very long track record of paying the dues yet. You know, so we're kind of like in the middle of doing that, and then it's probably gonna be a little bit too until we get to a point where um, that
Either more stuff is revealed, or we don't know what the next phase is, because it's like
yeah,
what the next
it's
steps
like,
are.
like
Like,
yeah, why it's so hard to say something, because it's kind of like you're in a dark room with a candle, and
yeah,
and and yeah, like we just got a lot more things to experience.
for sure. And I like Sadhguru said. He said that the path with Shiva, you're going somewhere. You don't know where you're going, but you're definitely going. You're definitely like moving in a direction. like in Hinduism, Shiva's often described as like one step before the source or something like that. So it's with Shiva, it's a lot of it's very foreign, kind of like the old ones. It's like it's like this path is so like different from the rest of the past with the gods or other entities, because it it's going from like personhood or this is that and that is that, to kind of merging with something that's beyond us. it often feels like madness a lot of the time,
Yeah,
and maybe that's the purpose of it.
I think it is, because I think that that feeling of madness is us changing and us evolving. You
Yeah,
know,
and instead of being stationary or like becoming too like not just comfortable but also too rigid in who we are, and then nothing progresses.
exactly. And that's the thing, when especially like being someone who practices magic and whatnot, you can't be stationary too long. Because energy stagnates. Pretty quick.
You have to do the work basically.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we always get that sense where it's like I need to start doing more work because
Oh yeah.
I'm starting to not move forward. Things are starting to be boring, and I'm honestly bored with myself. So I need to start doing more work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's like a big thing for me, is like it's always study. My nose is always like in a book, or trying to write something, or just keep moving. Like even when it comes to some of the jewelry that I make, you know, like you gotta keep working.
yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, so we're reaching the end of this part, but I want to thank you very much for talking to me again for part two.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yep, and we'll be moving forward after this as well.
Heck yeah. I can't wait.